Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. So appreciate everyone coming out today. Know you have a lot of great sessions coming around here, and happy you came to join us. So as mentioned, we are presenting here on increasing resiliency with cloud-based disaster recovery. I'm Garrett Pollard. I'm the Cloudendor Disaster Recovery Specialist for the United States public sector.
And I'm Roman Schwartz, and I am the Cloudendor Partner Development Manager for the East.
Perfect, great. So we're going to jump right into it. So before we get into the meat of the presentation here, I wanted to take a poll around the room, so we appreciate your participation here. So I want to ask a few questions. So by a show of hands here, raise your hand if anyone has ever had an IT outage. Never. All right. All right, how many have had outages? Plural. Oh, you're in the right place, guys. All right. So with those outages, was it days of downtime or hours of downtime? How about days? You guys. How about weeks? All right. Perfect. So to that note, another question. Who here has conducted a DR test, or at least knows that you guys have conducted a DR test in the past 6 months? All right. That's disturbing, but cool. So out of that, was it successful? Does anyone have not successful DR testing? All right, thank God. With that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Roman, talk a little bit more.
Sure thing. So one of the things that we really want to cover today is why public cloud for disaster recovery and how we can kind of help you with that. So when it comes to specifically public cloud and leveraging modern disaster recovery, the real idea here is that disaster recovery, business continuity, backup, it's a growing industry. And on AWS and leveraging the public cloud system, you're going to be able to come up quicker with less downtime, and you're going to be able to save a little bit of that money that you'd be looking to leverage when it comes to protecting your environment. So when we're talking about AWS in terms of backup and disaster recovery, it's really two kind of halves of the same whole. You really do need to have both backup and DR, and they serve two different functions, and so I really want to cover those briefly. When it comes to backup, you're talking about a focus on data, you're talking about a longer term retention, but also a longer recoverability. And we'll get into a little bit more of how disaster recovery and backup works down the road in this presentation. But specifically, when it comes to disaster recovery, we're talking about the ability to recover entire applications, entire environments, and we're also talking about the ability to do it quickly and be able to recover from things like ransomware, as well as being able to recover from any other outages that you have. Both are very important, but the idea of backup is to leverage it for being able to pull individual files, folders, long-term retention for compliance, whereas with disaster recovery, you're really looking for something that will allow you to be able to be up and running with no impact to your clients, to your customers, and be able to continue on the journey. So traditional disaster recovery, and this is where we get into the whole disaster recovery landscape that we started off with. The idea around traditional disaster recovery is that you're able to recover quickly, but there's a trade-off. There's usually larger overhead costs, you have physical data centers, you have contracts, you have to provision and plan ahead. And with all of the events that have happened in the past year and beyond that, we're really talking about the idea of having a strategy that's nimble and elastic. And that's something that when you're dealing with a traditional environment and not necessarily cloud disaster recovery is not really doable. So in terms of disaster recovery, and we sort of touched on this when it comes to backup and disaster recovery, there's really three options here. So there's backup, there's disaster recovery, and there's high availability. And when we're talking about the continuity strategy, I want to touch a little bit on how they work in terms of both cloud and not cloud, but for the purposes of this, we'll focus on sort of the AWS model. So the idea here being that backup and restore is always going to be the least expensive option for you. You're going to be able to be back up and running in a much slower period of time, but you can leverage tools like AWS Glacier and things like that in terms of being able to have that longer term retention for a simpler cost. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the concept of high availability, and with high availability, the real concept is that you're running in 2 data centers at the same time. Now, whether it's leveraging things like AWS or it's leveraging 2 independent data centers, you're still going to incur a higher cost because you have always on resources. Now, you're up a lot faster when it comes to high availability. You have no downtime. But there's also the added downside of what if you get infected with ransomware? Then you're simultaneously writing ransomware to 2 environments. So with the Cloudendure Disaster Recovery solution on AWS, you really fall right in the middle, where you don't have always on-demand resources or spun up all the time, so you're able to recover to the latest checkpoint or a point in time earlier, as Garrett will discuss later, but also because you don't have those resources spun up, you're able to really save costs. You're able to be nimble, and you're able to protect the data and be able to spin up quickly without actually having the ability to pay those higher costs of high availability. So it falls right in the middle there, and you're able to recover in minutes. You're able to have under a second in terms of data loss. So why do people look at AWS for disaster recovery? Well, to start, we're talking about improving your recovery objectives. And what we mean by this is, and you'll hear this mentioned throughout, your recovery point objective and your recovery time objective. Basically, the amount of data you can afford to lose and how quick you have to be up and running. Leveraging Cloudendor, as I mentioned before, you're going to be able to be up and running in minutes with only a second or so of data loss. So that right there gives you that nimble ability to be able to recover quickly, be able to continue your always-on journey, and then also not have to have a second data center with all of the provisioned disk, compute, and everything else to have to leverage when you're actually down. So the next part is ransomware. Ransomware is a conversation that I'm sure you have heard nonstop in a lot of environments. When it comes to ransomware, there is no actual solution for ransomware. There are ways to mitigate it. There are AWS services around security. But what's really important when it comes to ransomware is being able to recover quickly, being able to fix the problem that you have, fix the patches that you need to patch to make sure that you are able to not get infected again, but also to be up and running without disruption. And we see this a lot when we talk about hospitals, when we talk about schools, when we talk about things where there needs to be a messaging system or there needs to be something that is always on. And in terms of ransomware recovery, specifically when we're talking about Cloudendor, that ability to pick a point in time before the ransomware hit your system and be able to recover to it and continue the ability for your clients, your patients, your customers to have access to your services is really vital and critical. And then in terms of being able to protect large-scale environments, this really is where the elasticity of AWS comes into play. So effectively, as again, Garrett will show a little bit later on when we describe how the solution actually works, what you're going to be able to see is you can really leverage this for large workloads, for small workloads, for your critical servers, for your whole environment, and being able to be up and running in minutes. And when it comes to the idea of costs, that's really that elasticity that I mentioned before, where you're going to have the benefit of being able to save on things like hardware refresh costs, save on things like contracts and things like that, because all of this is on-demand resources. So as your business decides to grow, as you shrink, it really doesn't have an impact in terms of you have to provision more disk space. You have to find out later on that you're over-provisioned in terms of what your second environment or what your disaster recovery environment looks like. You can really be able to scale up and down as needed. And then finally, it really speaks to this whole total cost of ownership. Because we don't have servers that are really spun up all the time running your infrastructure inside AWS, you're only paying, again, for resources when you need them. So you're able to recover in minutes without having that price tag that's typically associated with having a secondary data center that you're leveraging. to really kind of sum this up, you're paying for the resources that you need when you need them. You have a shared responsibility model when it comes to the security side of the house, and you're able to save costs in terms of management and oversight of the system because of that model, as well as being able to be up and running in minutes. So to put these things in parallel, you're really looking at traditional disaster recovery versus Cloudendor disaster recovery. On the traditional side, you have increased hardware and operational cost. You have the problems with being able to test in an environment where, for instance, you have to do this over the weekend to not impact production, things like that. On the DR side, with Cloudendor, you're going to be able to basically save 80% in terms of cost just by not having those resources up and running all the time, but having them actually be on demand. You're going to be able to easily test during production with no impact. Plus, you can actually leverage that test and build a sandbox in AWS. Test out other features, test out other options, be able to really test your patches before they go live, things like that. And then finally, and I know I've talked about this for, I think, all of the slides, but it's elastic. That ability to scale up, scale down, be able to really leverage the whole concept of a nimble environment is really where this comes into play. And with that, I'm going to give it back to Garrett, and he's going to go into the solution in a more detailed fashion.
At least I'll try. All right, so I appreciate that, Roman. Really laying the groundwork for continuity strategy, because I feel it's really important to understand that so we know where Cloudendor lives specifically. So for those who may or may not know, Cloudendor is a solution that enables you to have point-in-time failover capabilities from any source into AWS, EBS, and EC2. As you can see on the screen here, you can protect your on-prem workloads in AWS. If you're all in AWS, you could protect them region to region or AZ to AZ, even cross-cloud capable here. Really the goal of Cloudendor in the first place is not only to reduce your costs around disaster recovery, but to make sure you can still maintain or increase your resiliency when it comes to how you operate. And again, as Roman mentioned, we're essentially staging your data in a dormant, low-cost state until you actually need to fail over and access it. So that's where the cost effectiveness comes in. And when we talk about business outcomes around Cloudendor specifically, a few points we'll touch on. Robust operations. We're going to be able to improve your reliability and your availability with how your business operates day in and day out. We're going to make sure there's uptime, no downtime, make sure you guys continue to do what you do. Then there's operational efficiency. Really, we're here to help reduce the need for paying for duplicate infrastructure and duplicate licensing, in the nature of which how we stage your data, which we will go through in a moment. And lastly, operational continuity. We provide you the ability to not only test, but test quickly, test successfully, and really give you that peace of mind that you need around a DR solution in the event something happens, that we can recover quickly. I really like to talk about Cloudendor with the 3 pillars that the technology is built on, beginning with flexible. So being flexible is important. With Cloudendor, an important thing to know is that we operate at the OS level. At this level, provides a great deal of flexibility here. As I mentioned before, it's any source into AWS. It's pretty flexible there. We also give the ability to protect physical, virtual, cloud-based machines, which is quite handy, I'd say. And then when it comes to compatibility, really the easiest way to put this is as long as the servers that we are looking to protect are Windows or Linux-based, and they're supported in AWS, EBS, and EC2, we should have no problem doing it. So definitely good to know there. And then we not only fail things over in the event things go wrong and you need to spin everything back up again, but once that event is over, we can fail back to the original location as well. So it's a nice trick to have. Moving on to reliable. Probably one of the most important things you'd want in an overall continuity solution to begin with. You want this to be reliable. So when you're using Cloudendor, this isn't going to impact any performance in your day-to-day operations. It's non-disruptive. And aside from operating at the OS level, Cloudendor is also utilizing continuous block-level replication. So when you're using it, any block level changes that happen at the source are immediately caught and synced with the target. And this is where we provide a near zero RPO, or recovery point objective. From a recovery time objective, or RTO, we provide 1 of minutes, so we can spin you up rather quickly here. And again, Roman the ransomware, he covered it really well, and this is kind of our PSA around ransomware. We are by no means that silver bullet to cure all your ransomware needs, but we're certainly a big part of the strategy. You should be talking with your account teams, and you probably already are having these conversations around it, around prevention, detection, and recovery. So Cloudendor falls in that recovery bucket. So in parallel to that continuous block level replication, which you're probably all thinking the same thing, that doesn't help me in a ransomware situation. In parallel to that, we're also taking snapshots that are air gaps from the source by nature. So as long as we know when this event has occurred, we can then select a point in time prior and recover from that point in time. So certainly something that we like to focus on, and it is part of well-rounded strategy around, as Roman was mentioning, backup, DR, high availability, long-term retention. There's a lot of tools at your disposal within AWS. Lastly, the last pillar here is it's automated. This one really speaks for itself. We actually had a builder session earlier. I don't know if any of you were able to attend, but we're able to showcase how easy the solution works there as well. But it is easy to use. And as I mentioned earlier, we also give you the ability to test the solution. A lot of people, do have trouble testing either frequently or successfully. So we're able to actually launch a test in parallel to what we're already doing. So you can launch one in an isolated environment, not impacting source or target, just to ensure that, hey, the stuff works, I feel good, checking a box, and everyone's happy. And also lower TCO. And as we reviewed earlier, in comparison to that traditional DR scenario, we're paying for power, cooling, people, equipment, that laundry list of overhead of managing your own DR infrastructure. We can stage that in AWS in a dormant state, so you only pay for the resources when you need it. So that's really where we're able to be very cost effective. So as we move on to some of the disaster recovery benefits here, they're pretty self-explanatory, but I'll dive in a little deeper. For those who may or may not know as well, Cloudendor also has a migration solution, now named Application Migration Service. It's a free lift and shift solution available to all of you to help move into the cloud here. The reason I bring it up is because Cloudendor uses the same baseline technology and can be used as a mechanism for migration. So in the scenarios where some of you are in the process of moving into the cloud, or you're planning to, but you're not quite ready to move just yet, maybe some of you are also on the fence. It's a big move. You're trying to decide if this is the right thing for the organization. You can look at Cloudendor Disaster Recovery really that's as a springboard into the cloud. DR is a common understanding with how it operates. It's not something new to IT professionals. And by using AWS as a new DR site, you're able to reduce your costs. Again, not paying all the overhead that is typically surrounding that. And at the same time, we can also help you improve your recovery time, your resiliency in most cases. Also with the testing capabilities that we do provide you, again, testing can become a little bit easier, a little less tedious, and a lot more successful. And as I mentioned earlier with the migration solution, it can be used as a mechanism for migration. So once you decide that, hey, I've been protecting on-prem in AWS, now I'm finally ready to move this workload there, great. Fail it over, it's where it needs to be. And then you can repoint it to another region for redundancy there. And even for those who may or may not be on the fence when you decide to do that, it's an easy way to go ahead and move into the cloud. So on that flip side, a lot of you may also already be all in the cloud, or in the process of moving everything there just as we speak. So really looking at cloud-based DR is an important thing that a lot of people haven't been really thinking about. And really when it comes to disaster recovery, it's preparing for the worst but hoping for the best. We want to make sure that no matter what happens in this crazy world, that we're protected and we know that we can recover in the event something happens. So by using region to region or AZ to AZ type of DR, you're able to increase your resiliency. You're also able to actually achieve geographical redundancy. That testing feature can also come in handy for some outside the box uses here. You can test some updates if you're looking to push out some patches, working on some new applications that you're looking to launch. These are alternative uses of the testing feature for Cloudendor. And of course, we talked about ransomware. It is a big piece of that puzzle. So now that we laid the groundwork for Cloudendure Disaster Recovery and all the finer points of it, let's talk a little bit more about how it even works and kind of piece this all together here. So in the diagram, let's not forget we are any source into AWS, as we remember the definitions of source and target here. First things first, we need to put together some prerequisites, really simple things like opening up port access 443, 1500 outbound, make sure you're not getting caught in any firewalls, things of that nature. Once we do establish these, we can then deploy an agent on the servers that we are looking to protect. This agent's very lightweight, actually operates more like a write filter than anything, but not only helps us with replication, also helps us communicate with the Cloudendor management console that resides within AWS. Obviously, we do need a place to go. So the prerequisites around our target, we need to establish an AWS account, as well as a staging area subnet for us to replicate into. So now once these areas are established, we're then able to begin replication. So replication is whatever you, the customer, are looking to provide to us directly from source to target. This can be AWS Direct Connect, could VPN, whatever you're deciding to use. And if you don't want us to use everything, you can throttle this bandwidth as well. And from the security side of things, again, operating at the OS level does provide a lot of not only flexibility, but security. At that level, we don't know what we're moving, nor do we have access to it. We are also using connections that you, the customer, provide directly from your source, your environment, into the target, which you also own. And at no point does your data ever go through any control plane. And it's also being encrypted and compressed both at rest and in flight. So at this point, we've replicated all your data from source to target, and now it goes into that continuous data replication mode. So it's capturing any block level changes that happen at the source. We see it, we sync it, and now we're just going to maintain that throughout the life cycle here. So before we can do anything around testing or failing over, we need to put together a blueprint. So the Cloudendor blueprint, it's our automation. Essentially, if you're familiar with the CloudFormation template, very similar to that. It asks for a lot of information because this is going to tell the servers not only where we got to go, but what we got to be when we get there. So it asks for subnets, IP addresses, security groups, instance types, really whatever we need to know to do that heavy lifting for you quickly. But once this is put together, we do highly suggest that you leverage the testing. Launch a test, make sure the blueprint works exactly how you intended. And if it doesn't, you can always go back and adjust it. So it's a safe way to go about it. So at this point, we're living in that day-to-day state. This is where Cloudendor lives probably 99% of its life aside from testing or an actual event. Again, we deploy the agent, it's replicating to the target, we're capturing changes, we're syncing them, the blueprint's been put together, it's been tested, validated, we're ready to go. So when an event does occur, you go into the console, you hit failover, you're prompted to pick from one of our recovery points. And again, the recovery points are, the retention is selected by you guys anywhere from 1 day to 90 days, schedule of which we take those snapshots for point-in-time recovery for the first hour every 10 minutes, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly. So depending on how long your retention is how many snapshots will be available when you actually fail over these servers. So when you hit failover, prompted to pick one of these, you select one. We grab that snapshot, move it into a brand new VPC or an existing one. And what we're going to do is deploy a machine converter if we're recovering from, or if we're failing over from an on-prem location. This machine converter will translate that on-prem language into the language of AWS seamlessly for you. But obviously, if we're coming from within AWS, this feature is turned off. And this makes room for the Cloudendor blueprint that we just talked about to do exactly what you told it or programmed it to do, and fail everything over in the matter of minutes. It's working for me. So the only other trick that we have up our sleeves at this point in time is failing back. So I'll cover it briefly, but failing back essentially is the same thing we just did, but in reverse. So we reverse that concept of source and target. We bootstrap a replication server on the target that we're looking to replicate to. That can be the previous target. It could be a brand new one, whatever you decide to do. We're going to take a quick rescan just to see if we can send back the deltas. If we can, we will. If we can't, we won't. And we just send the data back in the other direction. So it's not too crazy. It's not rocket science there. But more or less, it's how we operate. So we've covered a lot. Continuity strategy, Cloudendor specifically, went through the architecture. So now we want to get into, where do we even start? There's a lot of questions that people have. So when it comes to getting started, first things first, speak to an expert. Speak to your account team. You guys have endless resources here to reach out to around all things, not only continuity strategy, but AWS, Cloudendor. You have myself and Roman on the Cloudendor team specifically that, we're here to help answer your questions and help get you started with whatever you need. Really, those conversations typically dive into reviewing what you're doing in the first place. What's your DR strategy currently? Where do you want to be? What is the problem? Really help solve these for you. But we do have a ton of additional resources as well, and I want to let Roman kind of take it out of the way there.
Sure. So one of the things that we really advise when it comes to Cloudendor is rely on the expertise of AWS, but also rely on the expertise of the AWS Partner Network. And the reason for this is that the AWS Partner Network is able to operate when it comes to disparate architecture, when it comes to your environment. So we're not just talking about expertise in AWS or expertise in Cloudendor, we're talking about expertise on where you're coming from. And you can always ask us, a particular partner, if you're looking for a particular use case or a particular need, hey, do you have an expert that's dealt with X before? And we're happy to give guidance on that, and we're happy to direct you in the right direction. But also, our partners that are certified by the Cloudendor partner team are experts in setting up Cloudendor, but also setting up all the stuff around it. Garrett mentioned early on that Cloudendor is very simple to use, and it is. And the benefit of that is it's a very simple to use tool on AWS, but there's a lot of integration that you can build and customize for yourself and design almost a bespoke solution that really works for you. And the best way to do that is to leverage expertise in both your environment and at the same time in AWS and Cloudendor. And then finally, our partners have funding that is available through AWS where they can help to do this at little or no cost to you to be able to actually design a solution for you and act as an extra set of hands in terms of building it. So when it comes to the process of how you would build this, whether you're doing this yourself, whether you're doing this with a partner, with professional services, really the first part is to identify the applications you want to protect. Identify what's necessary for high availability, what's necessary for disaster recovery, what's necessary for backup. What applications fall where? And again, this is where you might want to lean on an expert. From there, you're going to really do an impact analysis. What is the impact of this application being down? How quickly do I need to get it back up? Is this something where I just need to make sure that I'm not losing 24 hours worth of data, or is this something that's critical for my business? And that really starts to put this picture together and really build this out for you in the way that it'll work. You then, as part of that, would define that RPO and RTO of how much data can I afford to lose here and how much downtime can I afford. And then you really start to factor in those compliance considerations. So do I need to present an audit report? How frequently do I need to test? What are my testing scenarios? Where do I need to build this out? In coming up with this strategy, you're able to really start to delve into building a disaster recovery, business continuity strategy around things like Cloudendor. So that's pretty much it for us. We're going to leave the next steps on here. This is a QR code you can grab to grab information about Cloudendor. It'll take you right to the page. We're actually going to put some stickers and business cards down here in the front that you can grab as well. And we'll
They
go
also
ahead
have
and
the QR codes on the business cards we have up here too.
yes. So if you want to not snap a photo of this, you are more than welcome to snap a photo of the business cards. Feel free to grab those as well. And we'll open it up to some questions. So thank you very much. But any questions that you may have?
And also, I just wanted to circle back to, with Roman and I's jobs here as like experts around Cloudendure Disaster Recovery, we try to provide things around proof of concepts or really whatever you guys are looking to do to help you guys support the business cases for your organizations. So again, we have a lot of partners that we work quite a bit with. And we're also thinking of really creative ways to have you guys get a look and feel for the Cloudendure solution, given that your days are pretty busy. So we are coming out soon with a, let's call it a gamified version of Cloudendure in a way. Hear me out. So with that, it's not the whole soup to nuts Cloudendure, but at least it's a fun way, we hope, for you to kind of walk through Cloudendure, the console, get to see the flow of things, get a better understanding, so that way when we engage and figure out what we're going to do next, that you guys kind of have a look and feel for it, maybe a little extra questions. But this is something to look out for. We'll obviously be sending a lot of information out about it, but figured it's worth noting for anyone who might be interested. But with that being said, I guess we'll turn things over for Q&A. If anyone has any
Feel free to
questions.
just walk up to a microphone and say a question.
Yeah, so my question, you said EC2 and EBS, so this is not a solution for RDS or databases, or what about databases on-prem?
Yes, you're correct. So it is specifically EBS and EC2, but we run a lot of databases on EBS and EC2. We do a ton of them. We protect a lot, you name it, from like SQL to Oracle databases. There's as long as it's Windows or Linux based and supported once we get it there, that's all we care about. And honestly, when it comes to databases, a lot of questions we will ask is about, what kind of connectivity do we have? Are you guys providing enough connectivity for us to keep up with whatever you're throwing at this database? Also, what do the change rates look like? And it's not so much a limitation of Cloudendure. We'll carry whatever you need here. We just want to make sure that we set you guys up for success and that we engage the right resources to make sure you have a backbone to properly support these databases running in AWS. But for your question, if you are looking at RDS or any of the other storage options we have, there are options for disaster recovery, backup, whatever you need. You have options. But when you are looking at EBS, we're going to be the guys you're talking to.
And then my second question was around bandwidth or network requirements for something like this. Do you have any rough estimate, which are sort of compression ratio or any numbers or metrics you can share with us?
That is quite the math equation. We got to factor in the spin of the Earth, and really what it comes down to, again, is understanding the workloads we're working with. How big are the individual servers? What kind of connectivity are you providing? We are replicating. We can't seed data, so if you are thinking about using like a Snowball or any of the Snow products, we are going to have to use bandwidth you give us to replicate everything there. So I think that's more of a one-on-one question. I'd hate to toss out any ballparks considering it's such a fluid thing to talk about there.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Hey, hi.
Hey.
Question is like a data. That data is a REST, so it's like a encrypted data. If it is an encrypted data in one of the database, like if you multi-region, like if you disaster recovery to another region, so when we encrypt the data in this, then the other region we should also like when you're retrieving that, decrypt the data, right? So when multi-region, how does it work? Like does it's also the keys, whatever the keys, and that keys can be transferred to another region, or like how it does?
I'll wait for it. You can. So can we transfer the keys?
We don't transfer the keys.
Yeah.
But like okay. So when we're retrieving the when we disaster recovery, suppose one active and other is inactive. So then once we either of the region is failed, so then we'll fail over to other region, right? So that time the same whatever the encryption, the data, like when you retrieve it, we'll decrypt that one. So but like how that other region is that it can be handled. That's what my question.
You would have to have that
Separate set. Okay. Like keys can be set up in that other region as well.
And this would be like a great, great opportunity because there's so many questions that we get all the time where we could definitely, grab one of our cards. We can engage the account team or one of our partners to have this in-depth conversation because again, everyone's environment is so different and these scenarios are very unique that we want to make sure we put all these resources we have available to you to put the best possible option together, whether it's Cloudendor or not. We have a lot of ways to go about all this stuff, but yeah, we have some of the cards up here, but definitely grab one, reach out, we'll set up some time, we'll chat.
Yeah, sure. And the other question is the multi-region, right? So the one is like on-prem and the other is a cloud. So that's still whatever the data, it could be always, it can be set up again in the cloud as it is, or the failover can be automated, can be done for the on-prem to cloud. Is that going to work like that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So my question
speak
is
a little closer to the
application-
microphone.
Oh, sorry. The applications are running in the on-prem. So suppose in case the secondary region, if we set up in cloud, so that can be is that going to help for automated failover too?
Yeah, because when you have your on-prem infrastructure, obviously we're going to look at it and make sure that, again, is it Windows or Linux based? Is it supported when we get there? So as long as that's in place, we'll be able to replicate that data into that target, stage it, and Cloudendor does all the automation for you in terms of failing all that over, and that requires a lot of information, as I was mentioning earlier. But yeah, we do a lot of, a pretty good mix of on-prem into AWS, region to region, some AZ to AZ, but of course best practices being regional redundancy.
Okay.
But yeah, that's very common for us to help with, and especially for, we're really popular with customers who are making the move into the cloud, and they're not born in the cloud, or they're trying to move their workloads there, trying to build and develop, whatever they're looking to do in AWS. It's a great opportunity to utilize something that everyone knows and is familiar with in disaster recovery and protect on-prem, and when we're ready, fail it over. So it's a very common practice.
Yeah, basically what advantage is what you're looking, right? So if you build an disaster recovery in on-prem, it will be cost effective, right? So they're more cost effective. Like in a cloud, that's what if AWS says, whatever the usage we are going to pay, right? So when we if we set up in a secondary region as a cloud, it's going to be help us that.
Yes. So from what I understand is it's the cost-effective nature of being able to set up in a second region of the cloud.
Yeah,
Is that the question? Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's absolutely the same way. So effectively think about it this way. If you're in one region of AWS, you're paying for the consumption of that region. If you're targeting a second region, you're paying a fraction of that cost because you're not spun up in that region.
Yeah.
So you're giving yourself the ability to recover from ransomware outages, from region outages, from anything that could possibly happen. And again, because you're not spinning up those resources until you actually need them, it's not costing you a whole lot. And we can get into individuals of what the costs are, what you're looking to do, but that's one of the main use cases that we see from cloud to cloud is that redundancy, the compliance, and the necessity for being able to recover from things like ransomware.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. We have a lot of these conversations, so especially if people have questions around TCOs or just really getting a good grasp of what does this even cost, what does it even look like, or can I even do it? This is literally what we're paid to do here, so we're happy to carry that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you said between availability zones and also regions, can you do both simultaneously?
You can only deploy you can't do it simultaneously. It is project based. So if you have multiple projects within the console, so you can have one that's on-prem into AWS, the other one is region to region, another one AZ to AZ. You can mix and match all these, but what you can't do is one to many. My brain's all over the place.
Are you asking for like a 3-2-1 model, like redundancy scenario, or?
I was just curious.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
one agent per.
I pulled up that website, so I already see kind of the answer, but maybe you can provide more details. So it says it's cross-cloud compatible too, so you can restore from like the other cloud providers if you need to as well, as long
Yep.
as it's like a Linux or a Windows system, I guess.
Yep, as long as it's, well, the target's always going to be AWS.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, if you're in another cloud provider, yeah, that's not a problem.
Does it still fall back, or is that not
Yep.
possible with that? Okay.
Yeah, but why would you? You know, you're in the greatest place.
I get it.
Good question, thank you. Anybody else? I know you're all just bursting at the seams. You just have so many questions. How about some of our outages people?
Are you the only ones calling it cedar? Do you guys call it cedar?
It's a good question. We call it CEDR if you're gonna use it that way. But yes, call
might
it Cedar
start.
if you like.
I've been on the Cloudendor team for close to 4 years. I might just start calling it Cedar now.
I like it.
It's kind of soothing versus disaster, you know?
But yeah, by all means, like I said, if there's other questions, feel free to stand up. Don't be shy. But also, like I said, there's stickers, there's business cards up here. Feel free to grab them. Reach out to us. We're friendly. We'll be here all day. So any questions you have, just grab us and feel free to dive a little deeper into any things you want to talk about.
We'll be hanging out.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
And please don't forget, take the survey.
Yes. Oh, shoot.
Oh, yeah. Well, you dropped the ball, Roman. Yeah, if you guys could take the survey,
Yeah.
QR code.
Sorry about that.
Your input is valued. We appreciate it.